Chris, welcome to the podcast. It's really nice to have an opportunity to chat with you. We connected via social media and I found your content and the things you talk about very relevant today, and just generally, but I think today more than any time that we're experiencing as a society. So thank you for making the time.
Thanks for having me. And I found you because of your content as well, which I really love.
Thank you. Give our audience just a little bit of a snapshot of your career, just kind of what you're doing. You're quite a dynamic individual. So give us a little snapshot of your career story.
Yeah, so I started out in corporate. My original background was in engineering. And I did, for a long time, I've been doing productivity, project management, and team productivity through its various phases and different, paradigms and techniques and strategies. But I was starting to see that it seemed like we were working harder and getting less done. And there used to be a happy workplace. We'll probably get into that in a minute, right? But it seemed like just there was more stress, people doing more multitasking, more communication channels, and that wasn't helping us be more productive. Seemed like it was making it worse. And I studied the kind of traditional people and did those practices, but I was starting to say, hey, I got to look at something different. So I started to look for people with more radical or different perspectives. One of them being like Tim Ferriss. I mean, his work was a revelation for me. It's like, wait, there can be another way. You can actually, be smarter. People always said, well, work smarter, not harder, but no one tells you what that means. He was kind of telling us how that could look and what that could mean. So that really resonated with me, and it didn't give me all the answers, but it started me down the path to, looking for ways, something that actually works, not these standard productivity tips that give you a little bit of productivity, but don't really move the needle. What are things that really can make a difference, not just in getting work done, which is important, but also in having that work-life balance? And that led to me bringing a lot of that together, both stuff I learned and stuff that I tried myself, into my writing the book, which is Less is the New More. And the topic or the theme being that, yeah, you can get more work done actually by doing less and have that work-life balance that we really need badly, everywhere. So that was kind of set me down the journey. I had a couple of life things happen. My mother passed away, and that was kind of a wake-up call. And then more recently, still working in corporate, it just seemed like, I was working again harder. So, I was using my stuff and it was getting better, but I was getting less and less motivated. It just, the benefit wasn't there. But the cost was, in terms of the work, not just the work because I was managing that, but like the stress and so on. So that's when I started looking at, getting into my own private practice and doing business strategy coaching, but also mindset coaching. Mm-hmm. So strategy, productivity, and mindset. And then I was able to, cross over into doing that. So I still do a mix of business productivity and mindset, because mindset is so important, but, the word is abused and overused sometimes. So I'm not always pushing that, but to me, makes everything better. So it's.
Hey, you, thanks for watching. If you're enjoying this episode, make sure to share it with friends and family who might find it interesting. Make sure to hit the subscribe button as well to stay up to date on weekly new videos that are going to be coming out with some awesome guests that I bring on. And if you have any questions, use the comment section to ask me questions, to interact. I look forward to talking to you.
So it's always a part of what I do.
Yeah. No, listen, mindset is where it's at for sure. And, but I like the points that you mentioned, that there's a lot of talk about different topics. And and actually before we start recording, we were talking about, you asked me if I do coaching. And part of the reason I don't necessarily promote myself as a coach, because it's become such a trend and there's so many people that are talking about certain things, but there's no tangible things. And you mentioned Tim Ferriss, and I'm a huge fan of Tim Ferriss. I love his books, and I'm looking there, sitting right there in front of me, but I love his books, and that's because he gives tangible, actionable steps to take, although he's not even a coach, right? But at least he's kind of giving those steps to take. And I think that what, this is where we have to distinguish between individuals that are out there that just kind of like giving the nice to do, nice to have, without a specific kind of like, well, here's things you can try. And a big part of that is having the right mindset to be able to implement certain things as well. So I think mindset is where it's at. But talk to me a little bit more about, I know some of the things that you talk about is the Great Resignation, and in your case, you might have felt almost similar feelings that a lot of people are feeling, which is like a little bit demotivated, right? Not really maybe, as excited to continue to work and etc. But what do you feel is happening overall as a society? Where is this coming from?
Yeah, it's still a great question. It's still topical and very relevant right now. And I've had some like roundtable type discussions on that because it's so important as well as topical. So yeah, I think maybe I was a little bit ahead of the curve, and then the pandemic. The pandemic didn't start it, but the pandemic just brought it to the surface, in spades, because people were already being asked to do more with all the downsizing going on that's been happening in most places for years. I mean, there's some places that are happy, and if you're fortunate enough to work there, that's great. But I've seen a lot of places where, the downsizing, the flattening of the middle tiers means there are less career opportunities. People are doing the work of multiple people legitimately. And so along comes the pandemic, and now you got half to a third of the workforce working from home, some of them not even working at all. And those people, I mean, they were feeling the emotional issues and drain with that. But then I started to see let's call them the caregivers, or the people picking up the slack, because these were the tough people, let's say, or people that were used to working hard, and now they're doing so much extra work, so they were starting to suffer. And I think a lot of those people got pushed over the edge as well. And I think other people who are maybe, let's say, less motivated, not picking at anyone, but they're just going to kind of go along with the flow. But you're seeing very good employees, managers, and so forth that just were pushed so far that whether it's physical exhaustion or mental exhaustion, just had to do something different. And maybe they've been thinking about it, maybe they weren't, and now they had to do something, or else they're just going to implode. And so, we still need those people in corporate. So it's really time to not just kind of brush that under the rug and start having those conversations and making the workplace, there's a bottom line. I understand that, we all respect that, but this is your lifeblood, employees still. And we need to make sure that as much as possible, they have an environment that does energize them, that does give them hope and motivate them, and also doesn't exhaust them, totally.
Mm. I have to play devil's advocate here. So I go back and forth with myself on these topics. And of course, with Western, we're in a space of, performance and well-being. But I wonder how much out of the individuals that are truly burnt out, right? How much of it has to do with the business and acceleration? Because so hear me out. So on one part, it's about growing the businesses. Anytime there's a change in organizations, right? Anytime there's growth, it impacts the employee. But I wonder how much of that has to do with like, this is natural and this happens. And yes, there's a lot more business pressures, but then there's this other aspect. Are people just maybe not managing certain aspects of their well-being in a way that they're prepared to manage the change that's coming their way, right? So I almost like, I feel like it's a two-way street here. So partially, yes, there are organizations that are just working people to all hours of the day, but then I feel that there's still a portion of people that are just simply not able to manage their energy in an effective way. And of course, nobody taught us, essentially, right? And so when we went to working from home, we never got tips on like, how do I actually manage my energy with this new way that we're working? So what do you think about that?
I actually very much agree that we have a tendency in America, the world, and exacerbated by the media, for the pendulum to swing, one way or the other severely. So, and it's kind of an unpopular opinion, but I do agree that there are people that probably should be more stoic. There are people that need the wellness and some care, to like okay, take a moment for yourself because you're forever taking care of other people first. And now it's, it's killing you. And there are people, it's like, well, maybe you should learn to be a little bit more stoic because, think of, think of all the advantages you have, be grateful for things you have. And people, and it's not necessarily, I don't want to say it's a generational thing, but you do know people that are able to go with the flow, have enough experience or adversity or challenges in their lifetime to say, well, this kind of sucks, but I've got the discipline, I'm going to keep going, I'll make it happen, right? And then there seem to be people who are falling apart at the slightest adversity. Again, I don't want to pick on people, but I think somewhere in that middle is a mix of organizations doing their part and individuals having some self-discipline and stoicism to like roll with some of the punches, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's just, I keep looking at your post because it says mindset, and it truly is about the mindset.
Yeah.
And I'm curious what you think about. So there's, we talk a lot about, again, like different tips and etc. But even in the, the Tim Ferrisses of this world, what we feel is missing as individuals, employees, whatever you want to call it, is the basics, right? Is like getting enough sleep, eating a little bit healthier foods, cutting out maybe extra sugars, drinking a little bit more water, and moving throughout the day. And again, just maybe I'm biased in this way, but at the end of the day, if you're not treating your body and mind, if you're not creating the space, then frankly speaking, a lot of things are going to make you tired, stressed out, burnt out, and just low on energy and emotionally lacking of control. And it's a down spiral. So do you feel like that we could do better in that aspect? And if so, like where do we start?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not a fitness guru, but I appreciate all those things you mentioned, right? I like, try to stay in shape. I'm not hardcore, dieter, but I do some things that are like a keto-like or paleo at times, right? I'll do a little intermittent fasting. Those things are important. And I do cover some of that in my book and with people, because you've got an energy curve, for one thing, that you should respect. And we're always like fighting it. And I'm also a big fan of time blocking, not only blocking out your productive times versus your, say, multitasking times, but also blocking out time for your relationships and for downtime. And I very much believe, and I've seen that you can, spend more quality or less quality time working and then spend some, more time reflecting or in less delivery intensive, I call them, things. And that can be, you can get a lot of done actually, in terms of thinking and so forth. That's when your best thinking happens, when you're going for a walk or, sometimes in the shower or whatever. And so that's a form of downtime. And you should totally take leisure time and where you're really not thinking much at all. But with that mix of things and time blocking, you will be overall more productive, more healthy, and just feel better because you wake up and feel like you got stuff done, and then you feel like you're not stressed. And always, you tell me if this sounds familiar, right? I used to feel like no matter what I did during the day, it wasn't enough. And I was thinking about the next thing. And then at night, thinking about what I got to do first thing, tomorrow, or the many things I had to do, right? Because I was falling behind. And then, people get in that cycle again and again and again. And that's not healthy. And that then means you're not getting good sleep. You're not taking time for your nutrition and things like that. And it's a spiral, as you kind of hinted at.
No, absolutely. And I'm saying this because I've been there as well, and it's very much relevant. I remember when we first started Bestern in 2019. I mean, and then 2020 hit, and not to go into that story, I'll save it for another day. But my health literally suffered because we're working, between my business partner, we're working 7 days a week, and we thought we're being productive, and both of us just got burned out. For me, I think, we've hit it at different stages, but for me, like, my health suffered significantly. And so part of my themes for 2021 and 2022 is just take it easy, and work is always going to be there. And when you're trying to build something, there's always something to do, there's always something to kind of go after, and etc. And it's just not sustainable long term. So I'm saying this because I've been there, and I've realized that going back to the basics, sleep, eating well, exercising, just doing things you enjoy, is where it's at. But I also know that you have a theme for 2022 and it's focused on ROI. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so 2020, we know what the pandemic was like. We're trying to do business during the pandemic, right? Some people did okay. Some people started new businesses, but for a lot of us, it was a challenging time because everybody is so hesitant to do anything. And then they're being budget conscious or they're just burnt out. And I had an associate coach. He was like, I give up. People just want to have fun. I'm not even going to try anymore. Right. And it was kind of true. People were just, I don't want to think. I'm just numb. I just want to do something, relaxing. Right. So, so it's a challenge in 2022, we're still rolling out of that challenge and a lot of those issues are still there. And I see it with different businesses, but, we have to, that's, part of the roller coaster. So we need to keep doing our thing. And I want to keep encouraging and motivating people and, and myself to stay in the game, just keep going it. I haven't stopped. I'm doing things at a good pace. That's not going to burn me out. I'm going to keep doing my things. I got, new projects going on this year and, be prepared to pivot or, ready when things open up. So, but we have to be conscious of what we're doing in terms of ROI, because that's the business climate. And it's, a bit like the stock market, right? You don't necessarily, you have to be careful where you're going to dump money into it, right? Sometimes you get in, sometimes you get out. And it's the same with investments. So for example, I've had people, wanting to do media with me. Hey, let's shoot a bunch of videos, get lots of exposure and so forth. Well, as the saying goes, you can't take exposure to the bank. So I think that it's not just to be budget conscious, but to think a little more carefully about what things are going to give you the bang for the buck right now. It's like, okay, I could do all these things. And focus is always important anyway. But also I think this year to really take a look at the ROI and say, yes, I could do a bunch of video, but is that really the right thing right now? I'll get to it, and that's true of a lot of things, right? I could be doing all these different things, but is the payback, i.e. ROI, going to be there for doing that? Or is it just something that I think I should do or would be fun to do, but it's not going to benefit, me or the business at this time?
That's a good way to think about it. Definitely relatable, because I think many people are trying to stay busy because they feel like they're doing something, but is it really getting you to that next level that you're looking to get at, right? Whether it's financial, whether
Yes.
it's business growth, etc. So yeah, definitely relatable. Reminds me to start thinking about my ROI. You reminded me now, because I tend to go into spirals as well of just like doing, because again, there's just so much to do, but it's like, what is really going to give you that? And I like it to have it as a theme. I think it's a great idea. Just have a theme, like focusing on ROI. I like that. And you have this thing that's called growth hacking. So now maybe we're familiar with growth hacking, but tell for people that are not familiar and kind of what do you mean by that when we talk about growth hacking?
Yeah, and it's has a lot of facets to it, but I guess the basic idea is doing. So hacking comes from, of course, people not hacking as in security breaking into your bank account or whatever, but the traditional meaning of hacking was people who try different things and different strategies, not just traditional stuff. So they take systems and things that were built to do one thing and they stretch them or bend them or tweak them to see if they can do something else. And so, I guess a few years ago, it's been going for now, the growth hacking in industries. And it has a bunch of different facets. It means a lot of the effort or literature is on, like, say, your website and SEO and your funnel, right? But the gist of it is you should start, so looking at things and doing scientific experiments, right? So if you have a funnel that says, okay, you're trying to take them from they don't know you to being a customer and maybe like a repeat customer, there's steps along the way. And so, for example, how do they find your website? Okay, you're going to do some kind of traffic approach in your funnel, and then they're going to maybe click on it, and eventually maybe they get to the shopping cart, right? Well, you could just kind of just leave that all to chance and hope you get the business. But growth hacking says you look at the pieces and see really where the bottlenecks are. So if you see that people are getting to your website and they only stay there for 2 seconds, well, your problem's up here. If they're staying on there and then they get the shopping cart and they don't click the buy, then you got a completely different problem that you should address, but you didn't guess at it. And then you can do other things like, A/B testing, right? So test different pages. You can go crazy with this too. I've heard it done with like Twitter accounts, or Instagram accounts and things like that, where agencies will have all these different pages and they'll do this massive, insane overnight kind of A/B testing to get people followers and growth. But then finally, you can take some of these principles and kind of apply it to just almost anything you're doing. It's like, okay, well, if you have your bio, you can A/B test in your bio. So you can test, and it's a little harder depending how much traffic you have. But maybe if you have a flow of looking at how much engagement you're getting, you can see, well, if I change my bio to this, how does that engagement compare to last week or last month, right? Your kind of posts and content you do. So you maybe have like content themes, and you can actually look and see with insights or whatever your tools are, see how different post topics are working or not working on your social media and things like that. You can even apply it to yourself in different ways. That's a little harder, right? Because you have to be able to measure it. But it's I just think I'm just fascinated by the idea of looking at what you're doing, having a hypothesis for an experiment, and then testing that experiment and looking at the results. And then you can repeat that cycle as much as you want.
Yeah, it's almost like this agile approach or design thinking.
Yes,
to just like to experiment, to do mini experiments that are inexpensive, hopefully, right? Yes. Especially depending on the size of the business, but kind of just doing these inexpensive experiments that can prove you one way or another, I guess, whether you should invest time and get the most ROI out of whatever it is. So that's nice. I'm curious about you as like in your own journey. So this podcast is around people that helping people just kind of coming out of their comfort zones, whether they are looking to start a business, whether they're looking for a career change, right? So in your own journey, what has been the hardest part about making the shift to kind of going into entrepreneurship? Or maybe there wasn't a hardest part, I don't know, but what has been your experience and what's helped you kind of say, you know what, it's time, you mentioned certain experience kind of pushed you to do this, but what has been the biggest challenge of kind of leaving that corporate world behind to some extent and saying, I'm going to do this?
So, I mean, there are a number of things that people usually think about, right? It's a leap of coming from something that's highly structured usually to something that's not. Wasn't necessarily that much of a problem for me, but you are responsible for managing, everything, right? There are other things though, like getting in front of people, and I'd done it for a while. Like I did speaking, I did sales support in corporate, where over time I learned how to, getting up in front of crowds, and I've actually done, like speaking things along the line, right? So that was something that most people aren't born doing really well, whether it's the dynamics of being a good speaker or just getting up in front of it, right? So one of the hardest things that I did in my life was, so I mentioned like my mother passed away, and it was really a wake-up call because I was just going down the path, and it seemed to be a good path at the time or back in the day, but I realized I was putting off all the things that I thought about doing and was never doing. And one of them was music. So I used to play guitar when I was much younger, and I just stopped doing music at some point. But I always wanted to and said I would, and didn't year after year. So I said, hey, I got to do something. So I started several years ago writing songs. And then I said, well, that's kind of cool. Maybe I can sing them. And then maybe I can go, so I recorded some, and then like, well, maybe I can go sing them in public. It sounded great, but that was a huge comfort zone leap there, right? And again, I'd been on stages talking to like hundreds of people, right?
But not singing.
And not singing, right? It's a whole different dynamic. And everything they say about stage fright is real. Yeah. So, but and that was really, really, pushing me out of comfort zones. And it was okay, right? I didn't die. It was all right. I got better at it. I sucked at it first, but everybody does. But that was just a huge leap for me. And so you don't have to. I don't want to say that everybody has to do something that radical, but yeah, if you start that stretch out of your comfort zone in one way, then you start learning how to do it and pushing yourself in other ways. And again, you don't have to be great at that overnight. You know, start slowly if you want. Get a little bit out of your comfort zone. You know, whatever it is. And then for some people, it could be even getting in shape because they've let that go for so long and they just don't know where to start. They feel like, okay, I'm lost, I'm done, I can't do it. It could be that. It could be, you know, it could be public speaking. It could be a lot of things. It could be doing your own stuff. All the stuff that, you know, you talked about, that we do, it was probably hard for us at one point, and it's hard for most people to get started. We take it for granted. It's like, wait, I'm going to go live on social media, or I'm going to post this vulnerable thing about myself out there. I mean, that's huge for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you get the growth out of that.
Yeah, and it's not easy, but it's I always wonder, like, why is it that something drastic has to happen to us? What is it that, and not to everybody, but majority of people, there are people that are just like from a young age, they're just doing things that are just, it's just, I don't know, it's part of their lifestyle. And so I'm actually studying behavioral chemistry at the moment and understanding why do we do what we do as people, essentially. So I'm taking it for fun, and it's blowing my mind because so much of why we do the things that we do, our level of resilience, our level of risk taking, has to do with prior to us even being born. So there's genetics that are involved, there's the time in the womb, there's of course the childhood, our upbringing has a lot to do with it, you know. But somewhere along the lines, no matter how different we are and how differently we grow up, somewhere along the lines we all get into this comfort zone. And I wonder what it is. I don't have an answer. My theories is just the way the system is set up, the education system, the work system, the corporates. It's just the way it's set up. It's meant to put us in a little box, and that's what we're supposed to be doing. And it doesn't leave much room for creativity or curiosity. And I'm hoping it's changing, but particularly like in previous generation, it was even worse, right? You just kind of put into a box, and this is what you do, and you stay in one job, and that's what you're doing, etc. And you just got to make money and support your family, and that's the max of your ambitions in life. And but yeah, so I don't know what it is, but at some point, I wonder if you have a theory about it. But what is it that at some point we lose this touch with curiosity, and we are not doing hard things anymore, right? So like we're not challenging. Like, when did this stop? Because as children we're very experimental and experiential. I don't know what's the word here, but you know, we're very curious, right? So any theories on what happens to us throughout our lives?
Wow, I mean, you covered a lot of ground there, and you know that. So there is, and for one thing, there is a curve of kind of a progression, right? Even in business, and businesses get stuck in that rut too, right? Where they're innovators at first, and then they start to make money, then they get into a maturity curve, and they feel too focused on maintaining the business that they don't invest enough or pay attention enough to the innovation, which keeps them surviving, right? Because you're either, you know, what's the cliche, you're either growing or you're dying, you know, quickly or slowly. And it's true for people, it's true for businesses. And you talked about, you know, childhood experiences. Like everybody has something, no matter how successful they are stuck at some point, and usually having to do with experiences in their life. Because like you said, as a child, you know, the universe was open, right? And then over time, you start getting told no, or you get, you know, have bad experiences. And I still, you know, so many times run into people, and one of the first questions I ask them is, okay, what kind of support do you have for this? And the people close to them will be the worst supporters, or lack of supporters, if you will, like over and over again. And recently I had someone, I thought, oh, they're going to change this, right? Oh yeah, my friends are really great. This one's supporting me. I'm like, how about your parents? And then, oh, my mom, right? Right, there you go. And they're well-meaning, right? Because they don't want, I mean, sometimes it's personal baggage. A lot of times it's personal baggage, right? Because they're in their comfort zone. Sometimes they're just well-meaning. It's like, no, life is hard, and I don't want you to fail. Or I don't want you to get hurt. It's like, well, you're going to get hurt, you know, occasionally, right? You're going to get hurt in life. Do you want to get hurt, you know, and learn from it? Or do you want to, you know, be in pain like a long, long time, which is what ends up happening. And there was another point I thought too. Oh yeah, sometimes we talked about stretching and so forth, but sometimes it's just like you said, the curiosity, and we stopped being curious. It's not even that it's painful. We just, like you said, at that learned helplessness that, oh, I need to focus on this stuff. I'm not being curious about things. And I had something, my friend put it really well the other day, that boredom is death. And you seem like an innovator and somebody who likes to, continually growing and learning new things, right? And I felt the same way. Just hit the nail on the head. It's like, yeah, I mean, of all the, yeah, I mean, starving would be not good, right? I mean, not having shelter would be a lot good, but we don't put enough stake or importance in, not mental well-being is part of it, but also like being interested, being motivated, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a huge driver. That's a huge part of our mental well-being, is to stay curious about stuff.
Yeah. And I used to think a little bit differently, and I have to give credit to somebody that came on a podcast, John Sene, and he's a futurist, and he's written books as well, and he talks a lot about kind of talent for the future and just what the world of work, what do we need to do as people to basically stay relevant. And I used to talk to him. I said, John, like, I think people are just lazy. Like, they're just, is it just the people are just lazy? Like, why can, how can you possibly be bored? And what do you mean? Like, there's so much to do. I feel like there's so many opportunities to create, to do things and to try things. And he said, Elena, and he really opened up my mind. He's like, it's not that. He's like, people just haven't found what is it that's interesting to them, and sometimes their environment doesn't allow them, because we don't know what we don't know, right? And if we don't know what we don't know, if we don't have access or awareness or just access to information, I mean, in the States we have a lot of socioeconomic issues in this country as well as other countries as well, but where access is not there for certain individuals, awareness is not there, environments don't allow them to thrive, environments don't allow them to be curious, oftentimes, and it's a lot of times it's about survival mode, right? So it's almost like, when do you have time to innovate and be curious, when you're just kind of in survival mode? And then and then you go into this victimhood mentality as well. So, and that kind of changed my perspective, because I used to be like, well, maybe people are just lazy. Like, people are just lazy and they don't want to do hard things. And, but he kind of changed my mind. But I don't know. That's where I'm at. What do you think about that?
So again, it's not a popular opinion, but I think there is some laziness, or there's some, we got maybe a little cushy over time, and we get so upset when our, Starbucks, mocha latte didn't come out right, or about little things. So that's a facet of it.
We've become soft as a society. That's what I feel.
Yeah, because we've been a long time, and I don't wish this on anyone, and we're seeing issues now, right? Some conflict. But when you grow up in a time where there was very little conflict or adversity, I mean, we used to have like major recessions. Now we have smaller ones. We had major wars going on in smaller ones. People had to work, in horrible conditions or in the fields, being exhausted physically. Now it's, in a lot of ways, that's improved and better. But like you said, it's maybe made us a little less, I'll say, resilient, right? You want to say soft. I do also agree, though, that environments have changed the work environment, because, and it's odd, because all this connectivity and access to information that we have just not made it better. Yeah, it lets us get answers and do some things really quickly. But in the work environment, you used to, kind of do your work, and that's mostly what you did. This was your job. You did the work. Well, now it's like, that's a small part of it. And you mentioned like agile teams. So it sounds like you've been in work environments, but you can spend a fraction of your time doing what you would call your work, or the core basic job. Mm-hmm. And then you're on, but you're doing documents. Okay. You're in Microsoft Excel or Word doing something. You have so many meetings, a lot of which you probably could live without, right? You're doing PowerPoints. It's just, and then you've got all the communication channels now too. So you're not just answering emails, which is a sink of time. Now you've got Slack or Teams or these things going on, so you got people simultaneously sending you emails, maybe calling you, sending you Slacks or team messages, like constantly, and you're just trying to keep up. So literally, when would you find the time as a person to either do creative things or to push and try to get somebody else, like your management, to support you in that? But it's important, though. And some companies do it, but very few. Google has the 10% or whatever time you can spend working on your own project. We have some people trying things that I'm really, excited about, like Patagonia, is it, to let people go surfing and kind of set their own hours, and they're still productive. I think we really need to like revisit some of that. And, you know, and again, this is not to, in spite of the bottom line, it's to help the bottom line, because these people, as I said before, are still your lifeblood. You still need them. And so are we going to create a climate where nobody feels valued? You just do it because you have to make a buck? Or do we make one or get some of it back where, yeah, it feels like a career path. You know, it feels like this is something that would be good for me. And I still have a work-life balance and I have a career path. I can move on and I can do exciting things, not every day, but I can work on exciting things. I can, you know, get promoted. I can work with other companies, you know, and I think we need to get a lot of that back. And a lot of it kind of went away. The budgets got slashed. People got, you know, more overworked, as I said before, with the downsizing and so forth. And, you know, a lot of this economics, but I mean, we have to figure out how to make it work somehow, because it's not a sustainable situation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned the Google part where they give the 10%, and you know, I've experienced this with different companies in the past, and I realized that it's just a perk, but bottom line is that if a person who wants to create, who is a high performer, who is trying to be better, who's trying to do something else, they don't need that 10% of their time once a month on a Thursday afternoon to spend time to it. They're already doing that thing. So it's, to me, it's like, it's almost like counterproductive. Like it's a perk, it's nice to have, but I realize it's not really, it's because it's not enough time necessarily to do stuff, right? Unless you're doing it with a team, which basically just might as well be working. So it's not really like, is it really doing a passion project? Because if you have passion for something, are you going to wait for that Thursday once a month, for example, for those half a day or a day that you're going to spend working on a passion project? Or are you going to devote your evenings and weekends and do it? So I always question these initiatives, because it's great. It's a nice perk. But realistically, people that want to do things, they're going to do it. They're not going to wait for the company to provide it, right? Which goes back to that curiosity and innovation and self-driven and resilience and et cetera that we talked about.
It's a fair point, and it has to be, one, it has to be authentic, and it has to, you know, it has to be not just a perk, but a signal. You know, like benefits are a perk, but there's sometimes a reluctance, like, well, I ought to do it, right? It's not like the company is so enthusiastic about it. And same with this, it can't be just, well, it's a perk, so I get them hired, but then I'm going to work them the same way, right? And it's like, you know, you deal with it. I mean, I think it's meant to be that, okay, you start out with this, and if it has potential, you know, incubated, it can grow into something bigger that you spend the hours on. And I think still there's an issue that there's just less time to do what they need to do, because there's so many, you know, we have the matrix they talk about, the urgent versus important. I think there's so much urgent, less important things that people are dealing with more, that, yeah, I mean, they can do it, but it's so much harder, because when do they find the time? Because they're working long hours to just get the urgent stuff done. They go home and hopefully spend some time with their family. You know, they sleep and they come back and do it again, right? So it's leaving less time. And I think that, and I would distinguish between, and I think it'd be interesting to see when things maybe improve a little bit, how the gig economy plays out, because that could be a nice way to complement you know, standard corporate. But you want to have, so there's going to be people who are just corporate workers, and that's okay, right? They're going to come, they're going to do their job. You're going to have the entrepreneurs, but I think you need the intrapreneurs, because I think we still need the companies. They have economies of scale and so forth. You need entrepreneurs to be able to do their thing. And I think they're the ones, I think we're making it really hard at entrepreneurs. We used to have like mandatory training years ago. Now it's like you can't get training for the most part, right? It's like, oh, learn on your own time. Okay, you can, but how much harder does that make that, right? Yeah. So, and what's the motivation for doing some of this? So if you're flattened and you have less room for promotion and less room to do new projects, and I was fortunate, most of my corporate career, I was involved in those new project things, but that's still, you know, companies are more conservative, they're doing less of that. That'll impact them too, but they're also impacting the entrepreneurs, I think.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think we need more entrepreneurs, and but again, you know, I keep thinking it just goes back to that earlier studies, education system. I think that in order for us to truly be productive in organizations and have the kind of structure that we're talking about here, we need to go back to things that are creating the future employee, right? And I think that's where the bottleneck is sometimes, but I think that's a whole other podcast, the gap between university studies or schooling and the corporate world, and what the talent challenge that just keeps growing every year, although we're becoming smarter supposedly and more technological advanced, but the talent gap is growing larger every year. And so I think there's a lot to discuss there. But I wanted to get into your book and tell us a little bit about your book. It's called The New More is Less, right?
Less is the new more.
Less is the new more. Sorry, less is the new more.
So it's kind of play on the words, like in fashion, there's like red is the new black or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a play on that theme. But the idea is, the theme is not only how to be more productive, but that you can actually, as I mentioned before, that you can actually get more done by doing less of what matters. And some of these things are counterintuitive. And like I said, you can't just do, tiny things to get there. You have to do some things that move the needle. And I mean, I'm still learning all those, right? Like I talked about the growth hacking, I'm trying to learn, concrete systems to be able to do that. And there's also a grit and flow, which is so grit is like having resilience we kind of talked about before. It's like, okay, suck it up and keep going. But there's ways you can improve that and kind of systemize that, if you will, not just leave it to chance and how you feel that day. And then there's the flow state, which comes from studying like extreme athletes and people that get into that flow and they just get up and get work done. And most people have probably experienced this in some way, but it's just, usually random. Okay. You felt a good day. Wow, I got in the flow state. I lost track of time and I got so much done. But there are, kind of ways you can promote that. So even since the book, I'm learning new ways to try and, to apply to productivity that are just not the kind of simple things that, people said in the past, like, okay, check your email less or do things like that. So, I mean, focus is a big part of it. We are so less focused, I think, than we ever were. And, you have to manage that because we have to multitask. So I'm not like, okay, you just do one thing and you forget everything else. I can't even do that, honestly. There are some people who are just so good at like picking up something and they'll just dive into it and they'll, just can do it hours and hours and get so great at it. I was never really like that because I need the breaks. My mind went somewhere else. You're kind of smiling, you feel too, but that's okay. But you need the focus still. And I advocate, you can do that at different levels too. And Tim Ferriss is a good example, but like Gary Keller of Keller Williams fame, he wrote a book called The One Thing. And the idea is what is the one thing you can pick that will make everything better? And you have to think about some of those things, right? Because sometimes you can do stuff that just makes other stuff less important or go away. So instead of doing 5 things at once and only one of them is meaningful, then why not identify the meaningful one and put focus on that for now? And you can do lots of things, but you should probably do them serially, okay? And trust that you'll get there and get the stuff done. So yeah, so have, focus. You can do that at the daily level. You can do it at the weekly level. You can do it at the project level in the year. Decide, okay, what's most important, focus on that, trust that you'll get to the other thing. And I'm realistic. So, and that's where the time blocking comes in. It's like, okay, this is your most important project. Focus on that, preferably early in the morning, preferably, while your energy is still good. And then I know you have to do the multitasking things. So do those like after lunch or whenever, right? Because I know you have to get to those and find, but you feel you've still been productive. You got something important done. And that is probably the thing that you wouldn't have gotten done that day at all, because you'll come in, you'll see your email, you'll look at your phone, whatever. And now you start doing these urgent activities. And that one thing that was probably best for you to get done, you might not even do. Or maybe it's 10 o'clock at night and you're like doing it when you have no energy and you don't care anymore, right? Or you just can't get into it. So that's a big part of what I talk about in the book. And I see it again and again and again. And I suffer when I don't do that. And I see other people suffering when they don't have some degree of focus. Yeah. And it's different from priorities. You set your priorities, but if you set 5 priorities and 5 of them are number 1 and you're doing 10 things at once, then you still failed. Okay, you have to make that hard decision. to focus on what matters.
Mm, yeah, very good point. Very good point. And where can we find the book? I'm definitely gonna order it myself, but I'm curious, like where do you hang out on social media in general? Where can people get in touch with you if they're interested?
So the book is on Amazon. That's the place to go get it. Get it Kindle or paperback. So I am on several different social medias, as many of us are, and I am that Chris Lee on most of them. ThatChrislee, because websites and domains are hard to get, and IDs. So that was one that wasn't taken across multiple channels. So I looked at, of course, Chris Lee was taken, 100 years ago. I looked at, the Chris Lee and all this stuff. So I got that one years ago. So that Chris Lee, I am on LinkedIn. I love Instagram. That's more of a guilty pleasure, but I like to hang out there. I am on Facebook. I think I'm at chrislee.1 there, but you should be able to find me. So yeah, anybody who's resonating with what we're talking about or thinks they might need help with their mindset, and by mindset, I mean, not just discipline. I mean, really getting unstuck on something, then, best thing to do is just DM me. We'll just have a casual, easy conversation, no obligation, and see, if we could work together, what may be best for you, what your next steps might be. So I encourage you to, go DM me on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram. Let's have the conversation.
Yeah, and I'll make sure to drop it in the description of this podcast episode as well. And we'll be sharing that. And I look forward to chatting about your book once I finish reading it. So I'm definitely, maybe that's worth another podcast in the coming future. So I'm gonna definitely get that. And yeah, thank you so much for making the time, for sharing. I feel there's another episode coming. I feel there's so much that we still need to uncover. But for this episode, I really appreciate you taking the time.
I appreciate you having me. I didn't know where to go, and I actually enjoyed that we just went with the flow. So yeah, love to come back sometime. Thanks again for having me on this one.
Absolutely.